time for Lykken on Lending.
Welcome, everybody. Good to have you with us.
Welcome to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update providing up-to-the-minute information on interest rates, loan programs, and hot industry news, all related to the mortgage industry. Brought to you by Transformational Mortgage Solutions. To participate in today's program, our guest call-in line is 646-716-4972. Now here's your host of Lykken on Lending, David Lykken.
Let's begin.
Listeners, I'm excited to have someone that I have recently gotten to know and really have enjoyed. His name is Earl Thomas Booker III, but we affectionately refer to him as Books. And so, Books of Candor, good to have you here. That almost sounds like something from the Hobbits, Books from Candor, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, Books, so good to have you joining in.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
Oh, yeah. You're a 30-year veteran in so many aspects of this. I want people to get to know you. And I mean, one of the things that intrigued me is your futures and option trading background. So give us a little bit of your journey to where you're at today.
Boy, oh boy, it's been a long ride. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin. I'll tell you a secret. I was a football player at the University of Wisconsin, 4-year lateral.
Well, when they meet you in person, you're this big teddy bear of a guy. So, your size would say that. And then you say, you're just too nice to play rough, tough football. But so you played football. Good.
Yes, sir, I did. And that led me to the IBM company. I worked at the IBM company for a period, did a little startup, and then I moved over to Fannie Mae. So I worked at Fannie Mae for a total of, let's call it 9 years, and did a lot of things there. Most of it was in what was called the e-business in those days. And then in the single family arena around counterparty risk. I had a fantastic time there. That led to a stint at CoreLogic. Well, actually, First American, then CoreLogic. Then I worked with a consulting firm, the Collingwood Group, and ended up now with Candor. So it's been a lot of players, a long ride.
Well, one of the things we talked about earlier is there's a few number of Toms in there, so I can understand why they decided there were. I think there's 3 Toms. Did you say there were 3 Toms inside?
Yeah, I was the last Tom hired, so I got to change my name. It was very interesting sitting on Zoom calls, having to figure out which Tom you're talking to.
Well, I like Books. It works really well. I'm really excited to have you here. And you're a chief strategy officer at Candor. And, everyone's kind of can include a lot of things, Books. So if you could explain at Candor, what does a chief strategy officer do?
Chief strategy officer at Candor is primarily about business planning. And that's the planning part of the job. The execution part of the job is you've got to figure out how to get into new areas, new products, new markets, new distribution channels, new ideas about how to use the product. And then a part of that is competitive assessment and understanding where the markets are and where they're going.
Well, when you look at a chief strategy officer, what was it that attracted Candor to you? And then again, you to Candor?
Well, David, that's a wonderful way to put that because I do think it was a mutual attraction. I've known Tom Showalter for quite some time. And frankly, at the time that Tom reached out to me, I was doing other things in the investment world with small companies. And I became very enamored with Candor as a product first. Tom is just, as I said, a wonderful,
amazing human being. His story that I've gotten to listen to now and record, and he is just such an amazingly wonderful human being, number one, but how he approaches life and his philosophy of life. I mean, you could just sit and listen to him forever and how he approaches life. And it's really exciting. Very good.
I do get an opportunity to do that now more frequently than I have in the past.
Well, after my time with him, I'm jealous of you because I can't get enough of Showalter time, man. I just can't get enough of Tom Showalter. But let's talk again a little bit. So that explains you that mutual attraction there. Did you start out as a chief strategy officer, or did you evolve into that?
No, I was hired in as a chief strategy officer at Candor, but I've done this role in other organizations. I had a similar role to this when I worked at Fannie Mae and the Fannie Mae e-business. The e-business has been since subsumed into the single family line of business at Fannie Mae, and it's gone through a number of iterations, and it was some time ago. And I'd actually done this for a company that was in the business of tough to serve and debt burdened borrowers. So I played this role before, but it meant something different in each place. And
Well, that's really it. And I think that's important here. I mean, I'd love to get into that and studying that, but we're really wanting to focus in on have this Candor centric, but man, that'd be a fun discussion to have with you, Book, sometime, as we may have to come back and record a session on just the role of a chief strategy officer. But I'm really interested in as what it means to Candor, what you brought in. The fact that your background in Fannie Mae, did that have a role in that? Were uniquely positioned you?
I think it helped considerably. I was one of the original people who launched Desktop Underwriter.
Oh, really?
So yes, I was tip of the sword on that one. It was an interesting challenge. I was new to the industry, had just left the IBM company, and that was my first experience in the mortgage business.
Oh, really? Get on there at Fannie. But I can understand that IBM going into that particular role there. What are the issues that you and the folks at Candor are thinking about, especially in the light of current market conditions?
Well, we talk about the market conditions a lot. I think we can get a little focused on the concerns about inflation, where interest rates are. But I would tell you what I'm focused on now is how to serve borrowers, how to use our technologies and our capabilities to get more borrowers into homes and to discover new borrowers. And then frankly, how to help our lenders think about how to organize around technology. Those are the big three in my mind.
So when you talk about organizing around technology, it almost begs to a workflow discussion, because I think a lot of people approach this the way they have for decades. And I've been at this industry for 50 years, hard to believe, but a lot of it hasn't really changed as much until more recently with the introduction of technology. And we're starting to see how that's playing out. Give us your thoughts on that.
Boy, that's a big topic. We'll have to take it a bite at a time. This is an elephant.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'd say is that over the period I've been in the business, probably the single thing I've noticed, there's no one way to make a mortgage, but there's 1,000 ways to make a mortgage. And
so true.
Maybe better said, there's 1,000 ways to make a mortgage. There's no one way. The challenge that I've seen, and I still feel is pretty prevalent, and it's been the same thing for the last 30 years, is that this business, the making of a mortgage, requires human cognition. Yeah. Meaning if a human doesn't see something, say something, or do something, a mortgage doesn't get made. And some would say, well, isn't that the way it should be? And I would argue that if you're looking for a process that's going to be flawless and precise, you probably don't want it based purely on humans, because humans can do a lot of things, but it's very difficult to hold a human responsible for being able to do all of those very precise, repetitive tasks exactly correct for all of the different narratives that come through the door around a mortgage story. And over that period of time, I really have thought that there's got to be a different way to organize yourself, where in effect, you can use the humans for things that make sense around what humans can do. And we can talk about that a little bit. And then frankly, you organize them around a process where a system that performs all the repetitive, all the precise, all of the consistent and uniform things that need to occur every day, every time you touch a mortgage. And that's really been, if you had to say a guiding light, that's the guiding light that brought me to Candor.
Well, first of all, I share your philosophy or your approach. It should be all about the borrower, because when we lose sight of the borrower, which is ultimately what we're doing, which is creating home ownership, you really do this. I agree with everything you said. The possible one exception I might say is that a loan doesn't get done, or it gets done, but it's done poorly and it's not saleable. And I think that's the part that starts getting expensive for the lender. The borrower got the loan, but I think that's what Candor plays a huge role in. And I can't wait to get into that a little bit later, because you work on the defense part when a repurchase is being suggested that needs to happen. So you guys play a great defensive role on that. But I want to talk a little bit more about when you were talking about how should someone look at bringing in, from a strategic standpoint, a product like Candor.
Yeah, Candor is a game changer. I know it, sitting in the strategy seat, I use that term a lot, but when I say it's a game changer, it's a way you can begin to organize your business around a central process, and more importantly, around what I'm going to call a galvanizing technology. Galvanizing in the sense that you can have a platform that you can array the expectations of what people do around what that platform does, and then use that to actually drive very, very high levels of precision, tremendous amount of speed, and you can really reduce the amount of time. And it's also, when you organize around a system in that way, you're less exposed to changes in volume, You're less exposed to changes in requirements meaning underwrite guidelines, because they're implemented every time the same way, uniformly. The systems take care of that. Now, systems don't do everything. They need to be programmed. So don't let me lead you into thinking that we do everything for everyone all the time and that's all you have to do. But you do have to think, you have to change your thinking, because now the system is actually leading you down the path instead of the humans leading the system down the path. And that's just a different way of thinking. I don't think it's not right or wrong. It's just different.
Right. Well, if you have a piece of technology that is built with a ability that adds efficiencies, you're going to want to pay attention. How do you integrate that into your current workflow process to get the benefits out of it? So I think there is a give and take in that for a successful implementation of any technology. It's just understanding where the benefits are and how does that work, and then making the appropriate adjustments from there. Joining the conversation is my co-host Mark Helm. Mark, good to have you here.
Hi, Mark.
A little pause. I'm putting a little pause in there just so Mark, do you have the notes up in front of you?
Yeah, I got the notes from Ben.
You got the notes and the questions. Okay, so we're ready to ask about question number 3, and I'll let you take that question. Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I can ask that. Tom, basically looking at what you do on an everyday basis.
Oh, sorry, Mark. We went to books. He is Tom Booker, but we introduced the part that you missed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I can do that. I like that.
Books.
I like that.
Yeah. There you go.
Book, based on what you do every day, can you give us an idea where technology is playing a role today in the low volume market that might be helpful for the clients and also in a tough time for them when they need more volume?
Well, great question, Mark. So I think many times in a low volume market, people think that technology is not needed or is less needed or is one of those things that you can actually begin to spend less on and use less. I mean, it's counterintuitive, but many people think that way. I would say technology infrastructure is more important now than it's ever been. And really, I'll give you 2 big reasons. The first is when the business and the volumes are in high demand, and we're about to go into mortgage season now. It's a very seasonal business. March through, let's say September is really when you're going to see the peak in the business. You're going to have no time to do anything. You're going to be looking to make hay while the sun shines. I mean, that is going to be how this works. So in markets where you don't have high levels of volume, you need to take advantage of that opportunity to build the processes that are going to allow you to scale efficiently and effectively. And I think most mortgage manufacturers think that way. The point I would make about technology, though, and I'm using this term generally, but I would say information technologies that actually are the central part of your operation, is that you want to have those technologies deployed in a fashion where, just as I've been discussing, you can rely on them to be a lever for both productivity, time, and precision. So if you don't have a technology that you can use as that kind of lever and have a high level of confidence in, I would suggest that one of the challenges we face today that technology uniquely can solve is that the expectation of perfection or the expectation of no mistakes on anything is as high as it's ever been.
That's a great point. A great point. And what we're seeing, especially right now, as we're in the season, you were saying earlier, we're from March to September, people are going to be busier. I think from God's lips to from your lips to God's ears, made that happen. There's a lot of lenders in this current market wondering if they're going to see a surge in volume like they have. But we do have the seasonality, and and your product is going to be available and working. I'm going to rephrase that. And Candor is going to be here through many seasons that come. And so we definitely are hoping that we're going to realize that this season. You were touching on the fact that this can help bring about quality. And I want to talk about something that isn't in your questions here. By the way, I'm going to change this up a little bit when I edit this out. So one thing that, don't want to reference questions. So one thing that I'm excited that you do is you provide support to those when there were imperfections. Let's say a company before they had Candor is now experiencing some repurchases, and now they have Candor and they can use, or considering using Candor, and they can use Candor to rebut those repurchases, if I'm correct.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, the investors would rather buy the loans and keep them if they meet their standards. That is the primary choice. Nobody wants to come and ask someone to repurchase a loan. However, if there's a set of circumstances where the loan creates a change in price because of either a mistake or an omission or some other set of defects, you need to be able to demonstrate your diligence. And that diligence should begin to be able to defend what you've done. One of the things we do with the Candor loan engineering system is we capture the thought life of an underwriter. So when I say the thought life,
yeah, I was going to say, expand on that. You capture the thought life. I got it.
Yes, the thought life.
That can be scary because trying to capture my thought life.
Think about that word picture. Wow.
Yeah.
But thought life of an underwriter, if you think about it this way, when a loan is being underwritten, an underwriter's got it for maybe 2 hours or 3 hours and may have 2 or 3 hours, 2 or 3 different days or more. And the only record you might have of what they're doing with their file would be their notes, along with the other notes. You don't actually have what they're thinking about or what they're doing. What the LES system does is it allows you to capture exactly what the underwriter was thinking about, the path they went to drive the logic itself, and then to be able to expose that later in an organized fashion where you can array the facts to share with someone that actually demonstrates your care and diligence in underwriting this loan. Now, I'm not saying that others do.
Yeah,
sure,
you mentioned a term in there, or some letters. LES, was it?
Yes, loan engineering system. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, I just want to make sure our listeners stayed up on that. I knew what it was, but I just want to make sure our listeners do as well. So go on, continue what you're saying there.
Yeah. So the idea is that you now have a way, an organized way to capture and array the facts associated with every step, every document, all of the ways you've interpreted the guidelines. And what's most important is you have that as data and a narrative that you can then share with another party and take them through the entire process of making the loan by scrutinizing those documents and that data. That's something that I would suggest most processes couldn't do because a human is not going to capture that information in a granular enough way when you're looking at trying to meet the production numbers and the speed and all of the drivers of pressure in the current marketplace.
It's crazy. Mark, when you start thinking about mapping an underwriter's thought process, their mind, that's pretty impressive. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think back to in the early 90s when I chaired the MBA Technology Committee and think about where technology is today compared to back then. It's certainly different, and we're using it certainly a different way. And so, Book, one of the things I'd like to comment on that and bring back to fruition is when you're looking at how technology is being utilized today, you've got 30 plus years in the industry, and I've got about as more than that, but I also have worked on advisory boards of systems companies and other things. And what we see today is so different than what we had 30 years ago. So could you just kind of compare and contrast what we did 10, 15 years ago in systems compared to what we do now? Because I think the audience would be totally amazed at really how different it is over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Well, when we talk about technology in general, if I go, let's go back to 2008. That's 15 years ago. That's right front end of the crisis. So if you think about it, one of the things, that's when the GSEs were being challenged. That's when there was a huge amount of concern about the level of defaults. We had an economy that was in very difficult straits. I'm building this picture because if you think about it, that was a very difficult time to invest in much of anything. But that actually ended up being a period where a number of investments were made somewhere between 2008 and 2010. Maybe 2008 and 2015 is a better span where point of sale systems, we really didn't have point of sale systems, so to speak.
Right. So exactly.
We really did not have internet connectivity for loan origination systems. Really, they were kind of built to operate out, in a cloistered way where they weren't really communications tools. The whole ICR and intelligent character recognition or optical character recognition, it was really just optical at that point. So there were a number of technologies we now use today, as a matter of fact, that really were not being utilized except by maybe the largest organizations. You now have the ability, those are now services you can purchase. Even when you look at some of the technologies that we now have, like for example, AI was something that people just would dream about. That's actually a big part of what we do right now. So and our company is AI based. So it's a really different world and you really do solve problems differently. And so Mark, what I would say is probably the biggest comparison I would make is not so much that technology is better or worse, it's more applicable to this problem. We had to take a lot of technologies and find out how to apply them to this problem. That's probably the biggest thing that's happened over the last 10 years.
I said I would agree with you, Book. You're right on point.
There's been a lot of skepticism. Can technology do the job for me? Can it really do the job? There's been a lot of disappointments in our journey further into technology as it's matured. But one of the things that Candor has done to back up their technology, they actually put an insurance policy in. If it's being used at the front end of underwriting a loan, you will get an insurance policy that there will be no defects in that loan, provided the information that went into Candor is the fact are accurate, that you will insure against a repurchase. Am I correct on that, Books?
Well, so what we do is we do two things. So first of all, we talked a little bit about, we capture the data and we help a lender portray what has actually happened in the underwriting of that loan, capturing the thought life of the underwriter through that process. But then if there is either something that Candor doesn't clear, because Candor does clear conditions, or we don't provide a condition that would make sure the loan was processed according to the guidelines, we have a policy where we will support the lender in managing the funding of that particular activity. And the way, if you think about that, probably the best way to think about this, David, is that we have a policy that covers, in effect, the gap in price that could be created by a mistake.
Okay.
That's really what it is.
That's what it is. So it's a gap insurance on a market price.
But the real risk in a repurchase is that you sell at one price, maybe par, and you have to sell back at some discount. We cover the gap between par and the discount. That's the way to think about it.
That's a great way to look at it. Thank you for putting that in the proper context. But when I talked to Tom about this, Tom Showalter, he says, what's so unique, Dave? We've never had to ever once call on our insurance policy. And that is quite a testimony, which goes to the confidence you can have in this system. It's pretty impressive. I want to go back and talk about all the repurchases that are going on right now, that are starting to happen. There's a crescendo of those happening in development world. They're increasing. And for those I'm a music major, so some people may not understand what a crescendo is, but anyway, they're growing.
I absolutely do.
So the fact is that people are experiencing more and more of them. How does this work with Candor? I mean, do you license it at that point where they can bring you in? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get to, then I'll edit this part out, but what I'm trying to get to is, do you wait till there's a problem to get it in? Or so that you can, I guess that's one way to look at it, right? You can, wait till there's a problem, then bring in Candor and start solving the past problems, creating the mind map of the underwriter's thinking, right? But it's better to bring you in up front. How do I want to position that question, Books?
So you can do it either way. I would suggest up front is better because you wouldn't be in the repurchase situation without an adequate defense.
I think I got the question now. So then obviously we want everyone to get a license and start using Candor on the front side, but there is that event where you're starting experiencing repurchases. You certainly be wise to bring it in now. Talk about that.
Yeah. So Candor is an underwriting tool. So if you think about it from the perspective of being able to both underwrite a loan as well as analyze a loan which has been underwritten to the conforming conventional standards, we can actually do the credit analysis after the fact. And it's just as detailed, just as precise as if you were underwriting the loan. So you could use the product as a loan review tool. So for quality control. So think about it this way. One of the ways you could use it, if you want to look at the production from last year, last month, last week, you could actually run Candor against that production and get an idea of where there are problems in your portfolio and have some sense. And by the way, if there's anything you can do to remedy them, you could address those remedies, but at least you have a better understanding of what your exposure would be. But I would suggest the best way to avoid that exposure is to underwrite with the platform.
Underwrite at the beginning with the platform. I totally agree with you. And I think one of the things is when you're looking at the repurchases, we've cut down a reduction in workforce. So there's been a significant reduction on the underwriter that underwrote the file may not be there anymore. So to have a system that can recreate the underwriter's thoughts based on the paper trail that you do have is significant. Mark, I'll let you jump in here with a question.
Well, one of the questions that I would have, it's kind of a little add-on here thing. Could you, since it's an underwriting-based system, would this system also be applicable in a loan servicing operation for underwriting FHA and VA assumptions?
That's a great question. The answer is you could use a system like this for any type of underwriting, especially if you're in servicing. Let's say you had a loan in forbearance and you wanted to make sure that you've got a borrower who, through the pandemic may not have been able to make payments for a period of a year or 2 years. A lot of people are in that circumstance. And you wonder about, well, they say, I'd like to modify that loan, or I need some help with this different set of terms. I can't write you a check for 2 years worth of monthly mortgage payments. You could use a platform like this to re-underwrite that borrower given their current circumstance and figure out what the right loan would be for that borrower, where they would compare if they wanted to look at going in the marketplace to be able to get a loan. So understanding that and being able to do that in servicing can happen with recapture, forbearance, loan modifications, all the circumstances where you'd like to have an accurate way to estimate a borrower's capability.
One of the things I like about what you just said in doing a workout on a conventional loan where you can take delinquent amount or a portion of it and balloon it at the end for certain investors, that would be real good because you can run the model for what you think they can afford to pay on today.
That's
the other
correct.
amount ballooned on the end. That would be great.
And when you have situations like the pandemic, or you have, you can have a flood or you can have a tornado, there's lots of circumstances where people lose their source of income and then have to regain it. And then you need to be able to figure out how to organize their financial lives and extend them credit on some basis. Tools like automated underwriting engines, especially like ours at Candor, really do step in a situation where it's difficult and can perform that very quickly and very uniformly. Let's say you have 100 people that experience the same challenge. You can actually have the same tool underwrite what they have for income in a consistent fashion. So you have a high degree of confidence that for those folks who have suffered that disaster, you have a uniform way of looking at the credit and making sure that they can get back on their feet.
The more I learn about Candor and the power of the technology, the artificial intelligence in this, it's a must-have. There's certain products that you go, I'd like to have, but this seems to be a must-have product as you look at this. I want to talk a little bit as we wrap this up about artificial intelligence. There's a lot of talk, especially with the recent launch on November 30th of ChatGPT. Everyone's starting to get a new sense of what AI, artificial intelligence, can in fact do. What is reasonable to us to expect in the future? Where are we going to see artificial intelligence? Now, you could speak about it from a Candor perspective or just generally books, what we can expect to see in coming into our industry.
David, you're asking a great question. And I think, I'm going to take that as two questions.
Yeah.
First, I'll talk a little bit about what Candor's done. So we use an expert system and some other tools to be able to do what we do. What's important about that is that, first of all, we can show you everything the system does. It's a clear box. You can see through it. As a matter of fact, it would be very difficult to support a lender in a repurchase or a make whole or any kind of demand from an investor of any type if you didn't have a system that could absolutely show you everything it did and the logic that was employed. So that's really important. But when you talk about ChatGPT and what I would call generative AI forms, which use machine learning and a number of other technologies to actually be able to mimic, is what I'm going to say, some set of activities. And that's really what it is mimicry. And so they must be taught. These are computers at the end of the day. They must be taught. And the thing I guess I'm amazed at is if you look at the adoption of things, if you go back and look at how long it took for 100 million people to get a PC or how long it took for 100 million people to get a cell phone, it wasn't a month. A month after these technologies were made available, they had 100 million users.
I know. That S adoption classic.
Yeah, I mean, it is just incredible.
It went vertical within months. I mean, to have the rate, I heard some statistics on that just recently, and it's astounding at the rate, which really drives to the point that if you don't have a business that is really enabled by artificial intelligence, such as what Candor provides, you're going to find yourself at a competitive disadvantage, it would seem.
Yeah, and let me tell you, there's two schools of thought here, and I'd love this debate. There's some people who think that artificial intelligence replaces people. I'm going to tell you that just has not been true with any technologies. As a matter of fact, it creates different jobs. So what you do have to do is you have to have dexterity. Mental dexterity. You've got to be able to think differently. And then the other thing it does, it actually makes the humans far more productive. And that's the part of this we haven't had a chance to talk about, where I think one of the wonderful things artificial intelligence can do is it can begin to organize information for humans to be able to help do problem solving. So we're at a time where affordability is a big issue. We're at a time where we're trying to get more people into home ownership. We're at a time where we want to look at all kinds of different income and asset types to be able to support their ability to qualify for a mortgage. A lot of times that's going to be a function of how you interact with a person and what your ability is to be able to put together that person's narrative in a way that allows them to understand what their capability is. That's not what our systems do. That's what smart people with smart tools can do much better. And that's one of the ways you're going to expand markets and grow in this space. To me, that's a big opportunity that's still on the table.
Yeah, it is huge. Not only that, we actually can reduce costs, create greater efficiencies, and shorten the cycle and create an overall general experience. I think it's all AI is really enabling the human to focus on the most important part of the transaction. And that's the relationship. And that's what you were just speaking about. Books, what a joy to have you here. I always enjoy my time with you. I mean that generally. I can say that about all the Candor folks, Tom and Sarah and the whole team. It's just a brilliant gathering of people that just love thinking about how they can make a difference in the consumer, for the consumer. And that's where you went to when we first started this interview. That's what you're about. That's what I'm about. Very good. Mark, any last questions?
Well, yeah, kind of a question and a comment. I agree 100% that technology is not going to replace people. But to me, the biggest value is it takes some of the more worrisome things and human error things, hopefully out of the transaction, because you get to double check something very quickly. You get to run another analysis against it to make sure the right decision is being made. And I think in our environment where we're held to so many different compliance standards and investor standards, et cetera, having somebody check the checker is a very good thing. And I think it adds a lot of value. And I agree 100% what you said, Books, about it creating other jobs, because it can allow you to be much more aggressive in the front end, finding better solutions for people, and then building an adaptation of a system to deal with it. So I salute you for what you're doing. And I too have been impressed with the whole team at Candor and looking forward to getting a demo on that underwriting system one of these days.
Anytime you're ready, Mark, but thank you so much for those kind words. We're trying to earn it every day. Not an easy thing to do. This is a very tough business. It's one of the oldest businesses out there. It's getting more complex and more difficult every day.
Yeah, it is. And that Mark's comment is a layup to ask you this question. How can people get a hold of you to get a demo of this product and talk to you more about the vision that Candor has and the difference it can make for their company?
You can just visit our website at candortechnology.com. We have a form that you can fill out. You can ask for the demo and we'll get somebody to work with you and arrange a time. Not a challenge at all.
Well, Books, thanks so much for taking time to be here with Mark and I. We appreciate you so much. We wish Tom and Sarah and the whole company well. We're going through some interesting times, and I think people need to take the time to get to know what Candor can do for them. Thank you, Books. Appreciate it.
David, you're a treasure. Thank you very much. Mark, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
You've been listening to Lykken on Lending, a weekly mortgage market update with your host, David Lykken of Transformational Mortgage Solutions. Join us next week, and thanks for listening.